When we imagine medieval life, we see knights, castles, or peasants, but rarely the secret, intimate world hidden behind stone walls. Intimacy then wasn't just about love. It was about power, control, fear, and survival. Medieval society enforced strict rules, yet scandals, secret affairs, and strange beliefs about the human body shaped daily life in surprising ways. These weren't boring times. Passion and danger often collided. And one scandal even changed how society views intimacy today. Stick with me as we uncover the hidden intimacy secrets of the Middle Ages. Stories of love, secrecy, and survival you've never heard before. Here's something wild. In medieval times, marriage wasn't really about romance. Forget candlelit dinners or falling in love at first sight. For most people, especially nobles, marriage was a business deal. It was about land, money, and alliances. Picture this. You're a 16-year-old nobleman. You don't get to pick your bride. Your parents do. Why? Because her family owns farmland, and that farmland means power. Love? That comes later, if you're lucky. But don't think this was just a rich person's problem. Even peasants often had arranged marriages, and dowries, basically payments or property exchange during marriage, could make or break a family. Now here's the part that might sting a little. Women had very little say in this. A young girl might be promised in marriage before she was even a teenager. For many, marriage was less about personal choice and more about survival. Sounds depressing, right? But here's the twist. Despite all these rules, humans are humans. People did fall in love. People did sneak around. And when they did, it often clashed with the most powerful institution of the time, the church. Which brings us to the next part of this story. How religion and society tried to control every aspect of love and intimacy. If you lived in medieval Europe, chances are the church had more control over your love life than you did. I mean, they even had rules about which days of the year intimacy was allowed. Spoiler, it wasn't many. The church wasn't just preaching from the pulpit. They wanted to regulate everything. Marriage wasn't just a social contract. It was a sacred ritual under strict laws. Divorce? Forget it. Forbidden love? Definitely not. Even holding hands with the wrong person could spark rumors that spread like wildfire. And then there was confession. Imagine having to spill your private thoughts to a priest, knowing he might lecture you about sin and morality. That constant fear kept people in line, or at least it was supposed to. But here's where things get interesting. The stricter the rules, the more creative people became at breaking them. Lovers found secret ways to communicate, through poems, coded messages, even carved symbols. The more the church tried to clamp down, the more passion found ways to escape. So what happens when love can't be controlled? That's when you get something fascinating and a little dangerous, the culture of courtly love. Alright, let's talk about something far juicier, romance. Because even in the Middle Ages, people couldn't resist sneaking around. Among the nobles, there was this fascinating idea called courtly love. Imagine being a knight, sworn to loyalty, but secretly writing poetry for your lord's wife. It wasn't about marriage, it was about passion, longing, and yes, a little bit of danger. These romances were often unspoken, played out through glances, songs, and coded letters. But let's be real, secret love wasn't just for nobles. Peasants had their own ways of breaking rules. Hidden meetings at night, whispered promises in the fields, or lovers sneaking behind barns. Love didn't ask for permission, it found its way. Of course, the risks were huge. If caught, punishments could be brutal. A woman's reputation could be destroyed forever. Men could lose their honor, their land, or worse. And yet, people still took the risk. Why? Because desire and love were stronger than fear. Now here's the cliffhanger. Sometimes these affairs didn't just stay personal, they shook entire kingdoms. Secret romances between queens, kings, and nobles often sparked wars, betrayals, and scandals that rewrote history. And one of the most shocking examples, well, that's coming up. Now let's step away from the drama of kings and scandals for a moment and peek into the homes of ordinary people. Because intimacy in medieval times wasn't just about secret affairs, it was also shaped by how people lived day to day. Here's the truth, privacy barely existed. Most families, especially peasants, lived in small one-room cottages. That meant parents, children, and sometimes even animals all slept in the same space. Imagine trying to whisper sweet nothings to your partner while your kids, and maybe a goat, are right there. Not exactly romantic. Beds were a luxury. Many slept on straw mats, sometimes 2 or 3 people sharing. Among nobles, things were fancier, with carved wooden beds and curtains for privacy. But even then, servants often slept nearby, so intimacy was never truly hidden. Despite this lack of privacy, relationships found a way. People created little moments, quiet touches, shared jokes, or stolen glances that kept love alive even in crowded homes. For nobles, private gardens or secluded chambers became secret meeting places. But here's the twist: how people lived also showed their social class. A noble couple might have their own room, but peasants had to carve out intimacy in the middle of everyday chaos. And that difference wasn't just about comfort. It shaped how people experienced love itself. So while stories of courtly love and scandals make history juicy, the daily reality was far more raw, human, and sometimes awkward. And speaking of awkward, wait until you hear what medieval people actually believed about the body and intimacy. Some of their medical ideas will make your jaw drop. Now here's where things get really strange. In the Middle Ages, people didn't understand the human body the way we do today. Science was limited, so myths, religion, and superstition filled the gaps. Doctors, if you could even call them that, often relied on bizarre ideas. One common belief was the four humours theory, that your health, personality, and even your desires were controlled by four fluids in the body: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much or too little of one, they said, could change how you felt about love or passion. And it gets weirder. People believed that certain foods or herbs could act as love potions. For example, eating onions or drinking special brews was thought to boost intimacy. Others used charms or even magic spells to attract a partner. Imagine going to a village healer and being told to carry a rabbit's foot to win someone's love. But here's the scary part. Sometimes these so-called cures were downright dangerous. Strange potions, toxic herbs, or bizarre treatments could do more harm than good. Yet people kept using them, because when desire and fear of loneliness mix, people will try anything. This shows us that intimacy in medieval times wasn't just about rules or romance. It was also about survival, faith, and even superstition. And speaking of survival, wait until you hear how women navigated these strict systems of power. Their role in intimacy might surprise you. Now let's shift the focus to women, because their role in medieval intimacy is one of the most misunderstood parts of history. On paper, women had very little power. Most marriages were arranged, and their choices were often controlled by fathers, husbands, or the church. But behind the scenes, women weren't always as powerless as it seemed. Noble women, for example, sometimes held incredible influence. Queens and duchesses could use their position to shape alliances, or even guide politics through their relationships. A whispered word, a secret affair, or even just withholding affection could change the course of events. For peasant women, life was different but just as complex. They worked alongside men in fields, cared for children, and managed homes. While their freedoms were limited, they still found ways to express love, resist control, or sometimes secretly choose their partners against family wishes. There are even stories of women using poetry, coded letters, or songs to express forbidden love. Some became legendary figures in tales of passion and defiance. But here's the twist. While women faced heavy restrictions, their voices still echoed through history. Their choices, whether silent or bold, often shaped the destiny of families, kingdoms, and even wars. And speaking of bold choices, wait until you hear about the scandals and infamous stories that made intimacy in the Middle Ages a dangerous game for both men and women alike. Now we reach the juiciest part of medieval intimacy, scandals. And trust me, these weren't small secrets whispered in a village. They shook kingdoms. Take King Henry II of England and his affair with Rosamund Clifford. Their love was so notorious that Queen Eleanor, his wife, allegedly confronted Rosamund in a jealous rage. The scandal made its way into legends, poems, and songs that lasted centuries. Then there's King Philip IV of France, whose relationships and accusations against the Knights Templar spiraled into one of the most shocking betrayals in medieval history. Power, religion, and intimacy collided in ways that left permanent marks on Europe. Even the church wasn't free of scandal. Priests and bishops were caught in secret affairs despite vows of celibacy. These stories spread fast, sometimes damaging the very authority the church tried so hard to maintain. The lesson? Forbidden love wasn't just personal. It could topple reputations, spark rebellions, and even shape politics. And that brings us to something even more intriguing: the scandals of everyday people. Intimacy in the Middle Ages wasn't just about rules or power. It was about real people, caught between desire and danger. Their choices, scandals, and struggles remind us that love has always been messy, complicated, and irresistible. And in that way, maybe the Middle Ages weren't so different from today.